This is where we really try to cut through the noise, pull out the key insights from different sources, and help you get genuinely well-informed quickly.
And today we have quite a mix, actually. It ranges from a quick Facebook post, a few tweets,
Right?
some Instagram stuff, a YouTube link, even LinkedIn is in there.
Yeah, a real variety pack.
Exactly. And they all seem to kind of point towards or connect with this much larger online resource called ZemmX, a place for thinking.
Zemix, okay, that sounds like the main event here.
It does seem to be the core piece we're digging into. So our mission today really is to navigate all these different bits and pieces and figure out, what are the main themes? What's the essence of it all?
Absolutely. And this Zemix site, just from an initial look, it seems very specifically focused. It looks like a comprehensive guide for EMHPs.
That's right, education mental health practitioners.
Okay.
So it appears designed to give them the tools, the knowledge they need to support young people's mental well-being, specifically within schools.
Makes sense. And looking at the site structure or the topics listed, it's incredibly broad, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just like one narrow topic.
Yeah.
You've got sections on specific mental health difficulties young people might face. Anxiety is there, low mood.
Behavior problems too.
Yeah, exactly. But then it goes into the practical side for the EMHPs themselves.
Yeah.
Things like, how to actually work effectively in a school setting.
Right, the nuts and bolts.
And how to work with parents, which is obviously crucial. Plus, foundational stuff like child development, understanding the context.
It really does seem like a one-stop shop for these practitioners. And it goes beyond just identifying problems, right? I saw sections on assessment techniques.
Yes, different ways to assess what's going on. And then strategies for interventions, like guided self-help.
Yeah, and it's self-help, okay.
And a lot on psychoeducation,
Yeah.
which is all about giving young people and families the information they need to understand and manage things better.
That empowerment piece.
Exactly. And it even touches on the sort of bigger picture, the policy context that shapes mental health support in education.
Wow, okay, so it's not just clinical practice, it's the whole ecosystem.
It seems like it. And it also gets into the training for EMHPs, how they're trained, the importance of supervision for them.
Professional development.
Right. Ongoing support. And even practical things like, copyright guidance for using materials.
Yeah.
It really paints a picture of a complex role.
It certainly does. And what really struck me was how it connects outwards. It's not just self-contained content on Zemix.
No, definitely not. There are links scattered throughout,
Yeah.
pointing to some really well-known, reputable organizations.
Yeah, I saw the Anna Freud Center mentioned, Kidscape.
Anti-Bullying Alliance, the NSPCC.
All major players in child well-being.
Absolutely. And there are also links to more general educational resources like BBC Bite-Size, specific YouTube videos.
Oh, interesting. Different formats.
Yeah, and quite a few downloadable documents too, PDFs, Word docs, looks like practical tools, handouts, that kind of thing.
So it's acting as a curator almost, pulling in expertise from all over.
That's a good way to put it. It suggests a very integrated approach. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel, but leveraging the great work already being done by these other expert groups,
Yeah.
making it easy for practitioners to find what they need.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So putting it all together, you've got the social media hints, the depth of Zemix itself, and then all these connections outwards.
Right, including mentions from places like the Anna Freud Center, connecting back.
It really gives you this this quite detailed snapshot of the support system, doesn't it? The knowledge base, the practical tools being used for youth mental health, specifically in schools.
It does. It suggests a really quite thoughtful, multi-layered approach to supporting kids where they are.
Okay, so stepping back, the big takeaway here seems to be that these sources, especially Zemix, represent a really rich, interconnected set of resources, primarily for people working as or training to become these education mental health practitioners.
Absolutely. It's a deep dive into their world, in a way, covering everything from understanding specific mental health issues in children and adolescents,
Right, the anxiety, low mood we mentioned.
all the way through to practical strategies for intervention, assessment, working with families, working within the school system itself, and their own professional growth.
And there seems to be a real emphasis woven throughout on using evidence-based approaches.
Yes, that comes through. And also on collaboration, the idea that effective support involves the young person, their parents or carers, and the educators all working together. It's not just the EMHP in isolation.
That collaborative piece feels key. So reflecting on all this, it paints a picture of a pretty complex but potentially robust system being built.
It does, which leads to a final thought, perhaps, for you listening. When you see the breadth and depth required, as shown in these resources.
Yeah.
It makes you consider the sheer complexity of creating and maintaining really effective mental health support for all young people within education. What do you think are the biggest challenges we face in making that support not just effective, but truly accessible to every child and adolescent who might need it?
Hmm. That's a really important question to ponder. What are those hurdles in practice? Something definitely worth thinking about. If you joined us last time, you'll know we started looking into youth mental health challenges and the role of education mental health practitioners, the EMHPs.
Hmm.
So think of this as part two. We're going deeper today, getting into the specifics, really drilling down into the practical resources and the approaches being used.
Exactly. Yeah, our goal today is really to explore the tangible information, the actual tools that are out there to help understand and address mental health difficulties in kids and teenagers. We've got a pretty insightful set of resources to guide us.
And these aren't just abstract ideas, right? We're looking at actual excerpts from a guide made for EMHPs.
That's right.
It covers, quite a range, spotting early signs of depression, understanding common mental health problems, intervention strategies, and some really vital points on diversity and culture.
Absolutely essential points.
So let's jump right in. Early signs of depression.
Yeah, understanding when a young person might be, starting down that path is just so critical for intervening early. We've got some insights here from the Anna Freud Center.
Okay.
Now, this specific bit doesn't list out all the early signs, but the main message is crystal clear. Spotting those changes early. That's absolutely key for timely, effective support.
It really drives home the power of being proactive, doesn't it? Catching something early it can genuinely change a young person's paths.
Totally agree.
And like you said, while these specific sources right here don't list the exact signs, for anyone listening who wants those concrete examples, the Anna Freud Center is a brilliant resource.
Oh, definitely.
Loads of info on their website, their social media too. They're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, you name it. Lots to explore there.
A wealth of information.
So building on that idea of early recognition, let's maybe zoom out a bit. Look at the bigger picture, the different types of mental health problems we see most often in this age group.
Okay, yeah. And this is where the excerpts from Zenimax, A Place for Thinking, come in really handy. They give us data from these big surveys done in England over several years, 1999, 2004, and 2017.
Right.
So these surveys give us a pretty good snapshot of how common different challenges are for young people aged, say, 5 to 19.
Okay, so what's the landscape look like according to those surveys?
Well, they sort of group things into four main buckets. First, you've got emotional disorders. This includes anxiety disorders. They affect around 7.2%, and depressive disorders, about 2.1%.
Yeah.
So overall, emotional disorders hit about 8.1% of 5 to 19-year-olds. But what's quite interesting is the gender split.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's higher in girls, around 10.0%, compared to boys at 6.2%, which, kind of aligns with some thinking that girls might internalize distress more, or maybe societal stuff influences how emotions are shown.
That is a noticeable difference. What about other types of difficulties?
Then you have behavioral disorders. They affected about 4.6% overall. And again, there's that gender dynamic, 5.8% in boys, 3.4% in girls. Hyperactivity disorders like ADHD were a bit less common, about 1.6% overall, but again, higher in boys, 2.6%, versus girls at 0.6%.
Okay.
And it's actually quite insightful. The source mentions there's a child's own description available of what living with ADHD feels like.
Oh, that's valuable. Hearing it directly.
Yeah, that personal view can be incredibly powerful for building real understanding,
Definitely. And the last category.
The final group is just labeled other disorders. This covers things like autism spectrum disorders, eating disorders like Tourette's, and less common things like psychosis.
Right.
This whole category was about 2.1% overall, broken down as like 1.2% with ASD, 0.4% with an eating disorder, and 0.8% with AX, or these other less common conditions. And helpfully, the source gives a link for more info specifically on living with ASD.
That's good. It's really helpful just getting a sense of the numbers, the variety of challenges. It also makes you think about the language, how we talk about these things. I saw the source mention that.
It did, yeah. It makes a distinction between what it calls diagnostic language, words like disorder or illness, and practitioner language, which might lean more towards terms like problems or difficulties. And that difference in words can really shape how we approach these conversations with young people, with their families. And for anyone wanting to dig even deeper into these specific problems, there's a link in the source for more detailed information.
Okay, so the picture's getting clearer about what young people are dealing with. Now let's pivot to what actually helps. The guide mentions guided self-help. What exactly is that?
Right? Guided self-help, or GSH, it's presented as a really key intervention approach, especially for EMHPs. The basic idea is to offer sort of low-intensity support.
Okay, low intensity.
Yeah, for young people with mild to moderate anxiety, maybe low mood or common behavioral issues, it's not deep therapy. It's more about equipping them with strategies, with tools they can use themselves, but, with some professional guidance.
That makes sense. Giving them the building blocks to manage things themselves? The source specifically mentions behavioral activation for low mood. How does that work?
Behavioral activation, BA. Yeah, that's a core part of GSH for low mood. The principle is pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Low mood often makes people pull back from enjoyable stuff, things they value.
Right, you just don't feel like it.
Exactly. Which then kind of ironically makes the low mood stick around or get worse.
Yeah.
So BA tries to break that cycle
How?
by actively, deliberately increasing the young person's engagement in activities that give them enjoyment or a sense of value or purpose, even if they don't feel like doing it at first.
So nudging them to re-engage even without the initial motivation.
Precisely. The source notes that mood improvements are more likely when each day has some of these enjoyable or valued activities packed into it.
Mm-hmm.
So it involves helping them figure out what those activities used to be or could be now, and then actually planning them into their day. The thinking is, it's harder to stay stuck in low mood if you're regularly doing things that feel meaningful or pleasant.
Sounds very practical. But the guide also flags potential challenges with BA. What should practitioners watch out for?
Yeah, one big one they mention is that the young person might feel criticized by it. Like it sounds similar to maybe parents nagging them.
I can see that. Like, just cheer up and do something.
Exactly. So it's really crucial for the practitioner to be super sensitive, to frame it supportively, encouragingly, not like they're just being told to snap out of it or try harder.
So the delivery is key. How do you manage that potential difficulty?
Collaboration. That's fundamental. The source really bangs the drum for collaborative goal setting.
But working with them.
Yes, working with the young person and maybe their parents too, to identify what everyone's concerned about and agree on goals that feel achievable. It gives some real-world examples, parental worries about, say, noncompliance, bad table manners, hitting, running off, tantrums,
Okay.
and how you tune those into specific agreed goals. And importantly, it stresses these goals need adapting. If the young person has ADHD or ASD or a learning disability,
That tailored approach seems vital. Seeing the individual. Now, how do they know if it's actually working? How do they track progress?
good question. The guide talks about using outcome measures,
Yeah.
specifically the RKADS, that's the Revised Child Anxiety and Depression Scale.
RKADS.
Got it. Usually used with secondary school-age kids getting help for low mood or anxiety. The process is typically do the full RKADS at the very start and then again right at the end.
And in between.
In between, at each session, the practitioner uses just the relevant bits, the subscales, to see how things are tracking.
And it's important this doesn't feel like a test, right?
Oh, absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm.
The guide really stresses making sure the young person doesn't see it as an exam. Practitioners should use supportive phrasing like, look, there are no right or wrong answers, or just ask if you're not sure, and definitely, this isn't a test you can't fail.
Yeah.
The goal is just a comfortable way to track progress together, non-judgmentally.
Makes total sense. What about the sessions themselves, the guided self-help sessions? What's the structure like?
Structure is pretty helpful, gives predictability. The guide emphasizes starting each session with a clear overview, setting an agenda together.
Okay.
And it really encourages shared decision-making about how to use the time.
Yeah.
So say something unexpected happened during the week for the young person or parent.
Life happens.
Right. There needs to be flexibility to talk about that, but also to think together about, okay, how does discussing this affect what we plan to do today? Weighing the pros and cons.
A balancing act, then. Framework plus responsiveness. It mentions specific session plans, too, for adolescent anxiety. What's in those?
Yeah, the source details plans for adolescent anxiety. Early on, a big focus is talking about recent times they felt anxious, digging into the thoughts, feelings, actions in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a lot on psychoeducation, just helping them understand what anxiety is biologically, psychologically.
Yeah.
Practitioners also work with the young person to build a formulation. Yeah, it's like creating a personal map of their anxiety,
Yeah.
what triggers it, how it shows up, what keeps it going. Identifying helpful coping versus unhelpful habits is key too, alongside agreeing on goals. And then practical stuff, relaxation techniques.
Like what?
Things like breathing exercises, grounding, using the senses, calming self-talk, finding or creating calm spaces.
Hmm.
Real tools they can use.
Sounds comprehensive, a step-by-step approach. Now, something that's crucial in any work with young people, understanding their background, their identity, the guide addresses diversity, cultural factors.
Absolutely. It has sections on BAME inclusion and cultural identity
Yeah,
and those ZMEX bits. They're really important reminders about needing cultural sensitivity. It discusses the term BAM, Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic, and BME, Black Minority Ethnic,
right.
while also acknowledging that how we understand and use these terms can change over time.
And it's got to be more than just knowing the acronyms, surely. It's about understanding the reality behind them.
Exactly that. The guy makes a really strong point that young people from BAME communities might carry experiences, emotions directly tied to racism, which significantly affect their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And these experiences have to be acknowledged, validated when you're working on anxiety or low mood. You can't just ignore that context. It'd be a massive oversight. Their anxiety might be tangled up with discrimination, fear linked to their ethnicity.
You have to see the whole picture, the context. It also mentions third culture kids. Some might know the term, but what's its relevance there?
Third culture kids, or TCKs,
Hmm.
these are kids who've spent a big chunk of their childhood growing up outside their parents' home culture.
Okay.
So they're navigating multiple cultures, which can really shape how their identity develops. They might wrestle with questions of belonging, where they truly fit in, and that can sometimes show up as anxiety or uncertainty.
So practitioners need to be tuned into those potential extra layers. How does the guide suggest actually talking about ethnicity supportively?
The main takeaway is, have open conversations about ethnicity, but do it sensitively, inclusively. It encourages practitioners to be aware of how different groups identify themselves and really create a space where these talks feel safe.
Not awkward or taboo.
Exactly. No fear of causing offense or being misunderstood. It's about recognizing, respecting the diverse backgrounds, and seeing how culture might intersect with their mental health.
Okay. Let's shift focus slightly to another major issue impacting youth mental health. Bullying. The guide covers this too.
It does, yeah. It notes there isn't actually a single legal definition, but describes it as, systematic aggressive behavior. It's aimed at someone who finds it hard to defend themselves against the bully or bullies.
And it takes so many forms now.
Absolutely. The guide lists several types: verbal, physical, sexual bullying, indirect stuff like spreading rumors, and of course technological or cyberbullying. Plus prejudice-based bullying targeting race, sexuality, gender, disability.
Cyberbullying feels particularly challenging today.
It really is. And the guide highlights how severe its effects can be. Because, it can reach into their home, spread like wildfire, stick around forever online, and often the bully's anonymous.
Makes it so hard to escape.
Incredibly hard to cope with and recover from.
A critical area. What kind of resources does the guide suggest for help with bullying?
It gives a really useful list.
Yeah.
Links to Kidscape, they have classroom activities, advice for young people themselves. There's Department for Education guidance specifically on cyberbullying, NSPCC resources for parents, and the CEOP website for online safety advice.
Practical links.
Very practical. And it also mentions video resources showing anti-bullying strategies in action.
That's a solid toolkit for anyone needing help there. Now, we've talked a lot about supporting the young people, but the guide does something important. It also looks at the well-being of the practitioners.
Yes, that practitioner well-being section. It's such a crucial reminder that the people providing the support need to look after themselves too.
Can't pour from an empty cup. Right.
Exactly. It talks about self-care strategies, making time for reflection on the work, building a strong support network with colleagues.
Does it suggest any specific tools for that?
It mentions one practical thing: using an activity log.
Okay. How does that work?
Basically, you track your activities through the day and then reflect, did this activity leave me feeling nourished, kind of energized, or depleted, drained?
Ah, interesting.
The idea is to get more aware of what actually sustains your own well-being and then try to consciously build more of those nourishing things into your routine. Helps prevent burnout.
Simple, but potentially really effective for staying resilient in what must be a demanding job. Now, just to bring all this together to see it in action, the guide shares a glimpse of real-world application.
It does, yeah. There's a really powerful little excerpt from Youth-Focused Programs Provide Mental Health Support. It shares some work by Belinda Hernandez Arriaga with a young client. It's brief, but wow.
Tell us about it.
Belinda talks about this young girl, maybe 3 months into working together.
Hmm.
The girl draws a picture, a mama cat and a baby cat, both crying.
Oh, wow.
And the mama cat has an X on it, labeled no papers. The baby cat has papers written above it. And this simple drawing just opened up. It powerfully showed the deep trauma around immigration this little girl was carrying.
Gosh, that's incredibly poignant. Just a drawing saying so much.
Exactly. It just perfectly highlights the complex, often hidden struggles young people face. And it really hammers home why support needs to be culturally sensitive, trauma-informed.
Mhm.
It shows that sometimes the biggest issues aren't obvious up front. You need that careful, empathetic, culturally aware approach to really uncover and help with what's going on.
It's a powerful note to connect back to the human reality behind all the strategies and data. So, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, well, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We certainly have. We've looked at, the prevalence of different mental health challenges, dug into interventions like guided self-help and BA, stressed how vital cultural awareness is,
Yeah.
talked about tackling bullying, and even touched on the well-being of the practitioners themselves.
It really paints a picture of how supporting youth mental health is.
Yeah.
Well, it's interconnected, isn't it? It's multifaceted. This EMHP guide gives such a valuable practical window into the resources and the thinking in this really important field.
It really does. And it shows how all these pieces, understanding the scale of the problems, using effective techniques, being culturally tuned in, dealing with external stuff like bullying, they all have to work together for a truly helpful approach to, boosting young people's well-being.
So, as we finish up today, here's maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Considering everything we've discussed, the range of challenges, our evolving understanding what single shift, maybe in perspective, maybe in approach, do you think could make the biggest positive difference to young people's lives right now? Something to think about. And perhaps check out some of those resources we mentioned. Thanks for joining us for this exploration.